My question is, where does the support come in for the parents? Where does the emotional support come in for you guys? You know, we're always looking into how to support our children, and some of the support that's out there, can be very, very challenging to access. You know, okay, we might get some of that support, some of those therapies, some of that respite, but what, as you've described, it's not actually respite. What is it that you guys do for yourselves to keep yourselves well?
Well, I think that was a challenge as well, because you have so many emotions raging through you, and the big one is guilt. You always feel like you're not doing what's needed, you're not meeting your child's need. And I found it really difficult to stop. But my husband and I made ourselves go off on our own and together and have weekends, have evenings out, just to try and continue to feel like we were human and we're a couple. And that was good, but again, it almost got to a point where everything was muddled. I think you lose sight of who you are. You're just this kind of person in the middle of literally at the point that my son left home, I was in the hallway trying to stop him going into the lounge throughout the night for hours at a time, and tired out. I mean, part of his syndrome is not sleeping, so obviously we didn't sleep either. You know, you lose sight of who you are, and you lose sight of what you enjoy, what makes you feel relaxed, all of those things. You just lose sight of it all.
Yeah, I think what's been interesting with respite for us is that I've realised that I haven't fundamentally changed as a person. I was a bit worried that I had, because I hate what my son's disability does to me. I hate the kind of parent that I've become. I'm stressed, I'm angry, I'm upset the whole time. But what I did realise is that when he's not around, I actually do revert to how I was before, and I was a bit worried that person had actually just gone. But it is still there. It's just that I can't access it when he's around. And even to say that, and to say that that's the way my son makes me feel, it's really, you know, it's a horrible thing to have to admit, you know. But I'm just an ordinary person. I'm not, you know, I've been put in this role as a full-time carer, but I'm not that person. You know, he needs a professional team of people round the clock, people that can sleep and then come into work to deal with him. Whereas, you know, I've had an average of 3 hours sleep a night for 9 years now, and you just can't. That's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. Sorry, go on.
No,
the other thing I realised when my son left home was that lots of families hit the point we hit, and we weren't unusual to get to a point to say we can't do this anymore. But in the lead up to it, no one told us that. So you feel like you're the only family who's not coping. But on reflection, there were many other families, and are many other families on a daily basis, who are not coping and are having to make the decision that their child needs to leave the family home.
But because there is now so little support from councils because of all the funding cuts, you know, they're actually forcing people into taking these decisions because there isn't the other kind of respite around and the support for parents that actually might prevent you having to decide that residential care is the only option. You know, I discussed this with social services this week, and a social worker who'd never seen me before and has never met my son just told me that clearly I needed some help to bond with my child. And that was the response, you know. Yeah, that was the response I had this week, And these are the people that's supposed to be helping us.
I was told
this is it, the judgment that you...
Sorry, I think that was Fran.
Yes, I was told once. I rang up social services and anonymously, so I was clearly very desperate at the point, just to say, you know, our son was away on respite at that point, and just to say, look, if we said that he couldn't come home, what would you do? And after a discussion, I was told by a worker that we would be taken to court for neglect. I just hung up at that point. But you know, that kind of,
But the fact that you had to get to that point and then still no help is offered, it's just crazy, isn't it?
Crazy. Edward in Southampton, join us. Hi, Edward.
Oh, good morning.
I've been listening to this, and you've been listening to it, and I could listen to people talking about this all day, because it's there are so many twists and turns, aren't there?
Yes, there are. We have a daughter who is 12 years old now, And all of the callers that I've heard so far this morning have really struck a chord with me. And the one thing that I reflected on was that as soon as our daughter was born and we realised how she was going to be and what her future was going to be like, the first thing we were told is that within the system here in the UK, with all its faults and all its positive aspects, the golden rule is the person that shouts the loudest gets.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's it.
You have to become a warrior.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's proven to be true. And I was talking to my wife about this morning whilst listening to your call, and we reflected that really just administering our disabled daughter with all the aspects of trying to get respite and benefits and making sure this is done and that is done. Really, it's the same as running a small business.
Mm-hmm. Can I say something? Can I say something? So sorry, but it's interesting, isn't it? You say, and you nail it when you say that the people who shout loudest get. But listen to you fantastic callers this morning: Fran, Claire, Suzanne, Edward, very articulate people. What about those who do not have a voice?
No, you're absolutely right, Nikki.
They don't get help. They don't get help. No, as simple as
Fall
that.
outside of the system.
We've had to fight for everything, and every so often I just think, what about those who don't fight? What about those who are on their own? What happens to them? We're almost getting what they're not getting. But at the end of the day, you fight for your own child and your own family. But you're right, people don't get it.
And I'm sure that we all know people like I do who are in very similar situations to us who've been refused the help that we've actually managed to get. I guess because we shouted louder.
So Edward, your own situation, and also I want to explore something that we've been hearing about a lot this morning, the respite, the taste of normality, what it's like going back to the other situation. Edward.
Yeah, I think that this was the thing that really made us want to contribute this morning was when we heard there was a lady who, I forget her name now, but there was a lady who said that respite is very useful. However, it's also psychologically damaging because it makes you realise what life could be like. And so you have that brief interlude where you can be free to be spontaneous with your children and go off and do with your other children, go off and do stuff. Whereas when your disabled child is back, life reverts to the usual sort of drudgery, for want of a better word.
Yeah, it's something that really hit me earlier on when we heard it it was Catherine, actually, who got in touch with us, one of our texters, and it really made me think that.
No, it's very true. Well, just, if I may, just on the front of being, those who are articulate, maybe those who have a bit more money and a bit more time can get the best out of the system. Very briefly, when our child was first born, we had to go through, as everyone does, to go through the statementing process. And then we then faced a local authority who, rather than identifying our child's needs and fitting services to meet her needs, they identified the services they had and then moulded her needs to fit their services.
Yeah,
Does that ring a bell with anyone?
Yeah, totally true. I mean,
Carry on.
No, I'm in the same position now. In fact, I'm a single parent, trying to hold a business together, looking after my son on my own, and I'm looking at extortionate private assessments. Really, really expensive, in the region of like £2,000 for one assessment, to avoid the local authority bringing in their own educational psychologist and writing that report according to the services they can provide rather than what my son actually needs. And this is it. I mean, I'm going to be in debt because of this situation, but if you're,
Yes, you've got to do it, though. We had a situation where the local authority wished to put our profound, blind, unable to move from one side to the other, unable to walk, unable to speak child in a normal school with a teaching assistant.
Oh, utterly, absolutely.
So the situation you're faced with is this is what we are being offered, and if you don't like it, you must take us to a tribunal, and then you find out that to go through that tribunal process, which is what we did, you've got to spend about £20,000 and a year of your own time, and that was without employing lawyers. Now, we went through that process, and yes, it did put us into debt, and we got our child into an appropriate school setting for her condition. But of course, along the way, we met many families who couldn't dream of spending that amount of money and that amount of time on fighting a local authority who fought us with ranks of solicitors and ranks of barristers to get their day in court. Most people fall by the wayside before they get their day in court.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, but you know, the flip side of that is that the council don't have the resources or the facilities to look after all these children, and it's a growing problem, you know, especially with ASD. More and more children are developing this, and nobody is really putting a lot of time and effort into discovering why. But, you know, unless they're properly funded, that they simply can't provide for every child, and this has got to stop because it's so short-sighted, because in the long term, it's going to cost far more to deal with parents who develop cancer or health problems because of the stress, to deal with siblings who grow up with mental health problems because of this, and then obviously the child themselves who's going to need care for the rest of their life anyway. It's the most short-sighted clawing back of money, and it makes me mad.
Yes, infuriating.
I think also, obviously my son's 21, so he's a lot older than your children. I spend time on the forums that are parents of children who have the same syndrome as my son, and it's obvious that the things I could access 10 years ago with some fighting are not being made available. So things are changing all the time. Respite isn't as easy to access now as it might have been prior.
Councils have 40% less money than they had 5 years ago. You know, that's going to... We're seeing this on the front line now. You can't keep cutting and cutting and cutting and then expect services to still exist. It's just not fair.
I'm going to have to move it on. I just want to say, Fran and Claire and Suzanne and Edward, thank you. 08085 909 693. More thoughts, please. More calls, and you can text us on